I want to start by acknowledging that I'm here today on the traditional lands of the Algonquin and the Anishinaabe peoples. At Volunteer Canada, we recognize and acknowledge the Indigenous peoples as the original stewards of the lands on which we work, live, and volunteer. We humbly express our gratitude for their long-standing presence and enduring connections to the land. I also want to recognize that we at Volunteer Canada are committed to upholding the principles of justice, accessibility, inclusion, diversity, and equity in all aspects of our work. We recognize the colonial constructs present in narratives around volunteerism and are working to shift these narratives to reflect diverse models of community participation in an effort to actively move towards reconciliation. So, welcome again. Today, the purpose of today's discussion is to celebrate the International Day of the Volunteer. We want to do that today by centering our discussion on the theme of belonging, what it means to belong and participate across the full lifespan, all the way from young to old. And so today, we are looking forward to a really interesting conversation with Donna Butts, Executive Director of Generations United, along with a question and answer portion of conversation. This conversation is an important opportunity for us to showcase and highlight some important work we're excited to lead around intergenerational engagement from coast to coast to coast at Volunteer Canada. We'll also be announcing our National Volunteer Week theme for 2025, which I know that everyone is really excited to learning about and engaging with. So there is a lot for us to get through and a lot to celebrate. I love this slide because as I reflect on it, it really makes me think about how volunteers are truly everywhere. So to everyone who's joining us here today and for all of the volunteers across this country in whatever ways they participate, happy International Volunteer Day. This global celebration honors the spirit of volunteerism and the incredible contributions of volunteers around the world and also here at home. I think we are all here today because we know that volunteerism is actively about creating the world we want, both to live in and to exist in now and into the future. It allows peoples and communities to participate in that co-creation and that active development. It's about joining a movement and creating change. When we volunteer, we're not just helping individuals, we're strengthening the social fabric that binds our communities together. This year, International Volunteer Day emphasizes the importance of including people at all stages, levels, and times to achieve the social development goals. Volunteering makes all of us and all of our diversity and uniqueness part of the solutions to the challenges we collectively face. Volunteers are often the first to respond, meeting the challenges with courage, dedication, and selflessness. I was reminded recently of an example where a volunteer was able to bring a huge pot of soup, for instance, to a community long-term care home where the residents had been without power because of storm damage for a long period of time. And I imagine that volunteer didn't even think about it. They just jumped in and said, well, I've got power. I have the means to make soup, so I'm going to make a huge pot of soup and run it to this care home where there's no power and hasn't been for a long period of time. Stories like that are examples that really are inspiring and give us pause to reflect on how we all have the capacity within us to step up and contribute in meaningful ways. As we celebrate those contributions, we also recognize the importance that we're working on collectively of building a national volunteer action strategy. This strategy is essential for all of us to unify around a shared vision of what it means to live in this country from coast to coast to coast. The National Volunteer Action Strategy aims to create new participation and engagement frameworks addressing critical economic, cultural, and social cohesion challenges, and build Canadian communities inclusively through volunteering and participation. By optimizing and future-proofing volunteering, we can ensure that everyone in Canada can participate fully and benefit from the benefits that are offered by volunteers. So today, we are looking forward to a deeper conversation on pathways to participation. And intergenerational engagement is one of those examples. Intergenerational engagement, it's a mouthful on a Thursday. Intergenerational engagement is a powerful way to connect younger and older generations and foster stronger and more connected communities. It's an evidence-based practice and it bridges generational divides, enhancing social capital. By promoting mutual respect, learning and collaboration, and through purposeful, community-focused activities, intergenerational engagement helps create a more resilient and inclusive community. It significantly improves the well-being and social connectivity of communities, and Volunteer Canada is excited to explore ways that we can deepen that practice here in this country. And so we're going to learn a little bit more about that in the conversation we're going to have today. So as we reflect on the theme for International Day of the Volunteer, I would ask all of you to reflect on the ways in which volunteers are showing up in your life in small and big ways, and to celebrate all of those contributions in all of the various ways that they matter. So at this time, I'm really pleased to introduce you to our guest speaker today. Donna Butts is the Executive Director of Generations United. The mission of Generations United is to improve the lives of children, youth, and older people through intergenerational collaboration, public policies, and programs for the enduring benefit of all. Dawn is an internationally sought-after speaker, author, and advocate, and she frequently speaks on intergenerational connections, grandparents raising grandchildren, and policies effective across the lifespan. She's appeared in lots of publications, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and others, and has been interviewed on the Today Show, National Public Radio, ABC News, and has been invited by the United Nations as an expert to speak on panels. In 2015, she was named as one of the top 50 influencers in aging by Next Avenue, and under her leadership, Generations United received the 2015 Eisner Prize for Excellence in Intergenerational Advocacy. She's an incredible speaker and partner, and we're really excited to have Donna here with us today to have this important conversation.
Well, thank you, Megan.
Yeah. Over to you, Donna, just for maybe a brief word of hello.
No, I just wanted to say hello, Megan. It's great to be here with you. I wish I had your bio to read to everybody. That was very kind of you to share that. But I'm really excited to be here with you to celebrate National Volunteer Day and the Year of Volunteers. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Donna. And Donna, just for everyone's awareness, Donna and Generations United is a partner that we're working on. We have a strong partnership that we've been working on around learning from Generations United and taking some of their best practices that they've implemented across the United States and in partnership with other countries around the world, thinking about how we might adapt and bring them forward within the Canadian context. So welcome, Donna. As we think about the United Nations, sharing today as National Day of the Volunteer, it's impossible for us not to achieve our goals without engaging people across all stages of the lifespan. And I think often of my own, I have two small children, and I think about the ways in which they gain meaning by contribution and how they also learn from their grandparents and those older adults in community that are sharing with them wise practices that they're benefiting from. So the theme this year really highlights the importance of volunteers bridging the gap between generations. And so as we think about connecting generations for a more sustainable, inclusive future, do you think we're seeing changes in the way different age groups want to engage in community, or are their motivations shifting in any way, shape, or form?
What's interesting, and Megan, we are thrilled at Generations United to be working with you folks as you're building out your national strategy. There are some wonderful programs underway in Canada, and to have the umbrella that you provide and the encouragement, the inspiration, and also the background understanding how to develop high quality intergenerational programs is just going to make such a difference, because we believe so deeply in the importance of, sometimes we call it human capital, but it's realizing, as you said, that people have something to contribute at all ages and stages of life. And while the environment around us may change, that connection between generations is something that has helped us throughout time, whether it was when older adults would care for infants while their parents went out to hunt and gather, to people who stay home and help care for the children, to the traditions, the history, the roots that are passed on from older adults to children. It's that connection and that weaving from one generation to the next that's so important, and realizing that we don't live in isolation from each other. So I think that, in terms of things that we see that have changed, I know we're going to address these as we continue our conversation, but it's really critical today more than ever that we're working to intentionally connect generations, because there's just too many opportunities for age groups to be siloed, segregated, and kept from each other.
Yeah, and based on the work you're leading in the United States, have you seen some of the shifts in participation, Donna, specific to how generations are coming together, or the barriers or the limitations that are preventing them from engaging in more connected ways?
You know, there's always some sort of barriers and uh, issues that keep people apart. There's also, we live in a changing environment. So we're not the only country that has experienced some division, and some becoming acutely aware of the fact that people have in many ways become divided. When we think about that from a national perspective, when we think about a neighborhood or a community, it's your neighbors, it's your family. And so we need to make sure that we're strengthening that we're bringing that message to light, and that people of all ages need purpose, they need value, they need to know that they're not going to be judged for who they are, but accepted for who they are.
Yeah, I love that refrain, Donna. And when I think about the work that you lead and all the organizations and communities and neighborhoods and groups that you support and work with, um, and the changes that are happening that are often challenging generations and folks to participate and come together in good ways. Do you see ways that organizations need to think through how they're designing programs to better foster that sense of connectivity and engagement? Like, are there some examples you might identify for us?
I think in terms of some of the things that organizations need to keep in mind is that some of the newer programs that we've been in discussions with recently talk about surveying older and younger people. And what both older and younger are saying is, I'm afraid of being judged. I'm afraid of not being accepted. I don't think I have anything to offer. And that's when we get into, understanding that I know you and I have discussed this, that there is that decline in a sense or feeling of belonging. And so the intentional intergenerational work that we do, and starting small, starting slowly, can really help to make sure that we make a difference. And I think a great example is a program in Gaithersburg, Maryland called Beloved Community, or Gaithersburg Beloved. And it was started by a retired minister who, he and his wife, who'd always been activists, moved into a gated community for older adults. And one day he realized that he was on one side of the gates with all of his primarily white older adults that had the money to live in this community. And every day he would see on the other side of the fence younger people of color who were walking to school, who were trying it in this community, and they felt like they needed to break down that gate, that bridge. So they started with a really simple program. They went and talked with the schools and with the local organization, and they started a dialogue program between generations. And what they found were young people who felt like they were being persecuted, they weren't being accepted for who they were. And they were able to pair them with older adults who had survived the Holocaust, who had survived internment camps, who had survived so much. And together the message was, we can survive, and we can thrive, and we can do that together.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I know we have leaders from various community-based organizations or networks that are joining us on the call. And I know that those leaders are also implementing innovative practices and are keen to hear about the ways that your organization and its networks have supported that sense of bringing generations together and supporting belonging. And I think that theme of belonging is especially important today. As we think about the sense of sort of social isolation and loneliness, we're hearing a lot more about what we're referring to as a belonging deficit and how that impacts various groups and also various ends of that lifespan in different ways. So one of the things we hear about is, and data is showing this to be true, is that people are not feeling as connected to community and that their sense of belonging has decreased. And so I'm curious about how intergenerational connectivity can increase people's sense of belonging, and whether you have examples of the benefits of connecting in that sort of way that strengthens a greater sense of inclusion and belonging.
Belonging is such a huge issue. We know, especially while we were all surviving the pandemic, that people felt lonely, they felt isolated. But then we also found that people felt like where they were, they didn't belong, that they didn't feel connected to other people, they didn't feel connected to their community or their roots. And the role of intergenerational work in communities and in neighborhoods really fosters that sense of belonging. I can contribute, I can give, I have value. I know that I can have an impact, even in a small way, just as you were describing delivering the soup, delivering something, doing one thing, checking on your neighbor, um, being sure to, in the area that I live, we are on the end of a cul-de-sac. And what I love is there's this change in the families. We're now some of the older people in the neighborhood, and it's great to have these children, and they know that they can ride their bikes up our driveway and they can say, hello, Miss Donna. Hello, Mr. Bill. But it's letting them know that they're welcome and that you're there. And also that if you leave your bike in the middle of the street, we're going to make sure somebody knows about it. So it's that looking out for each other that I think makes a real difference and helps people to feel like they belong. I think the other important element about intergenerational practices is to realize that at their core, they combat ageism. And ageism is experienced by younger people and older people. Those are the groups that are basically devalued because of where they are on the age spectrum. And so intergenerational programs, you realize it's not just those kids or those older adults, it's we, it's us. So I think that intergenerational practices really, really have a huge role to play in increasing inclusion and belonging.
That sense of really understanding our place in connection to others, that there is more to life than ourself, is, I think, a really profound and impactful benefit that comes from intergenerational connection. I reflect as you're speaking on a previous theme for international, or for National Volunteer Week rather, which was from empathy to action, and I'm often encouraged by the ways that my young son, when he's interacting with older adults, begins to see himself in different ways through his contribution outside of himself. And so I love hearing you speak, because it's inspiring to think about the various ways that contribution makes different impacts across different scales. So we've heard about the benefits of connecting generations. And I think everyone on this call, because I can see that there's tons of tremendous leaders in this space, can see the possibilities for brighter futures by doing so. But when you think about challenges, what would you identify in terms of some of the challenges that inhibit that work, or how might we make sure that there's the sense of a positive experience for everyone involved?
Great. Well, for one thing, I think that intergenerational work, intergenerational practices, intergenerational solutions are intentional. That we intend to connect generations, because there's really a difference between multi-generational and intergenerational. And chances are everyone has been in a multi-generational park, a multi-generational center, but what you find is you have two or three or four generations, but there's no intentionality making sure that whoever's in that walker, on that walker, who's ever in a stroller, who's ever in a wheelchair, connect if we don't intentionally prepare them. And it's really easy to run into barriers, to either think it's too big or too hard. So I always encourage people to take a nibble. They don't have to start a huge multi-layered complex project. It can be something very simple, like people in a small town in Kansas did, where the older adults were worried about the children in this town of 1,200 people. So every Monday, the older adults would go to the school and they would greet every child that came in the door. How you doing? Hi, welcome. We're so glad you're here. You're going to have a great day. And they realized that that was probably the first positive thing that that child might have heard that day. And so after all the children were in the school, they went into the cafeteria, had coffee together, and then went about their days. It was a very simple intervention that made them feel like they were supporting the children and made the children feel like they were being supported. So I think some of those small steps to remember that. And also, it's oftentimes people will say to me, "Oh, my child doesn't want to be with somebody that's older, or my parent doesn't like children, or whatever." And it's making those assumptions, which we can't do. And so we need to be careful about pushing back on that kind of perception. And then we run into sometimes zoning policy, regulations, things like that. And we need to make sure that we find ways around those. And then sometimes it's things as simple as transportation. So if we're thinking about a community where they've got a transportation issue, it's how do you solve that with an intergenerational solutions lens? Because chances are younger and older need help with transportation. So it's really looking with that intergenerational solutions lens at the opportunities that exist in your community and in your programs.
Yeah, that's great. Those are some great examples that push the envelope also for thinking about that intentional element that exists in all sorts of design systems in our communities. Um, you've given folks today here really some inspiring examples of how bringing generations together within their own organizations can create different levels of impact. And when you think about the principles that are embedded in that work, what are some of the key principles folks should be aware of as they think about integrating intergenerational elements into their own programs?
A lot of it is common sense that I think a lot of people that are here today know. Um, we all know that if you build it, they won't come. That we need to make sure that people are engaged in the planning process, that they feel some ownership. I've seen so many well-intended programs where the older adults planned what they were going to do with the young people, and then they were surprised that no young people came, or young people who planned what these older people needed. And in fact, what they needed was really to connect with each other. So it's that inclusiveness, the making sure that people are involved in planning, that they have that they're empowered to plan. It's not just a rubber stamp. It's respecting and valuing people at each age and stage of life, that non-judgmental zone. It's the reciprocity, understanding that intergenerational work is based on reciprocity. It's not just one generation giving to the other and one receiving. It's very reciprocal, relationship, responsive, and that there's a range of opportunities because not everybody's interested in art, not everybody's interested in science, not everybody's interested in protesting in the street or trying to make a difference in their local government. But there are those things that people want to rally around, want to join around, and that is really one of the most effective things that someone in their planning can do is realize that not just putting two groups together and hitting blend and think they're going to get along, but it's the two groups together around a common purpose.
Yeah, and I reflect also about that the intentionality of the intergenerational practice, and the ways in which there are so many benefits that are derived from that. I think even about board work, for instance, and examples where really innovative and brave boards are thinking about ways by which intergenerational practice can strengthen their board activity in unique ways. So um, we're going to just briefly touch a little bit as we wrap up our conversation to hear from you about for the practitioners and those that are leading innovative programs and organizations across the country. What advice might you give them around some first steps for them as they start this journey or as they reflect on the journey that they've been on? How might they strengthen their intergenerational practice and engagement practices in meaningful ways?
Well, I always encourage people to use an intergenerational lens to look at what you're doing and how you could make a tweak so that what you're doing is intergenerational. That way, it's not as heavy of a lift. But if you're already doing a reading literacy program, are you thinking intentionally about the generations that are involved with that? Could it be college students, not just older adults? Could it be reading buddies or pairs that are done in dyads? So look at what you're doing and think about that intergenerational solutions lens. And then in terms of really connecting in, I am so excited about what Volunteer Canada is doing and working on and what you're going to be describing today because I think it's an incredible opportunity for programs and people who care about this around the country to have that hub, to have that connection, to connect with each other and form a learning community. That's one of the things that we do here is we have learning communities around shared sites, around higher education, on different topics so people know they're not alone. And it's taking advantage of the resources that do exist. Our website has many, many tools, how to start, how to make the case for intergenerational work. So please take advantage of those and realize that there really isn't anything anything new, and we borrow from each other, and we do good by borrowing from each other. And then I do have to also extend an invitation. Generations United every other year hosts the biennial global conference, which is the only and the largest gathering of people who are interested in intergenerational practices. And that's going to be in June in Louisville, Kentucky. We're really hoping that we see a lot of people from Volunteer Canada as well as the entire country, because that again is that community, that learning community where you can share what you're doing and you can learn from others.
Yeah, and we've really benefited from the generosity, Donna, from yourself as a leader of Generations United and from your network. And we've been inspired by the stories you've shared with us and the insights you've provided on how we might go forward as a leader to strengthen this practice in the Canadian context, working with leaders and organizations across the country. So we're very appreciative of your generosity, time, and the ways in which you're supporting and nurturing our partnership. As we wrap this portion of our conversation up and begin to talk more deeply about what we're doing within the Canadian context, I would love for folks in the audience today to think or reflect on any questions you might have from Donna, because as we think about our own role at Volunteer Canada, our hope is really to provide that backbone support and that umbrella to enable practitioners and practice to be strengthened in this way across the country and to learn from all of you folks on this call. So I don't know if there's anyone in the audience who wants to ask a question or provide a comment. I know we've got some time, about 5 or 6 minutes or so, to ask any questions. And so we would welcome anyone in the conversation here today to throw a question into the chat if you have one. Heather's going to help us facilitate a bit of a Q&A. And I know this is the time when people often freeze up and have nothing to say, but we would love to hear from folks if you have any questions for Donna, because it's a real treat to be able to have her on this call. So we'll maybe pause for a minute and let people ask a question in the chat.
I did want to mention one thing, Megan, and that is that we're so thrilled to be working with you folks. And one of the team for Generations United is on the webinar today. So I wanted to make sure that I shouted out Alan Hatton-Yo, who is our senior fellow that lives in the UK. And I know he and Alonka Walker on our staff have just been having a fabulous time working with Anita, with you, with your team, and are very optimistic and about what's going to be created in Canada. So thank you very much for working with us, allowing us to work with you.
Yeah, we've really benefited from the partnership, Donna. So looking to the chat, and Heather, I think, is going to facilitate some questions, and I'll let Heather jump in.
Thanks, Megan. Absolutely. So we do have just a couple of questions, but I would encourage others, as you think of questions, to please pop them into the Q&A or into the chat, and we'll make sure that we present them forward to Megan and Donna. So to get us started, one question that someone raised was, how can we better integrate intergenerational engagement into workplaces or education systems? And whether you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I would suggest two things. One is, several years ago, we created a toolkit on how to intergenerationalize your workforce. And a part of why we did that is because as everybody's looking at the multiple generations that are in the workforce and coming into the workplace, people are thinking about how you can individually get a generation, or how to understand what motivates every boomer or Xer, or which is, we know, is crazy because people are not a monolith, but to intergenerationalize intentionally your workplace. And so we created a toolkit that had different activities and different surveys and scales that people could use. So I would recommend that for folks. And again, it's the intentionality that I think makes a difference, and the acknowledgement.
Thank you, Donna. Appreciate that very much. We've had another question pop up in the Q&A as well that touches on research, and I'm going to make the guess that the answer to this question is going to be yes, and that you should look at the Generations United website. But just in case you have any sort of specific thoughts to share around it, somebody has asked if you've done any research on the impact of intergenerational engagement and connectivity to increase belonging.
Yes, I would again, I would thank you for mentioning the website. I would recommend to people, we have a publication that Ernest Gonzalez at NYU University and his students, a creative force called Making the Case for Intergenerational Practices, and also a fact sheet. And it breaks it down by age, what the benefits are at each age of life, which I think is very, very helpful. And it talks about things like um, I think one that always moves me the most is that young people, children who have been in intergenerational programs, intergenerational shared sites where they may have been in childcare that's co-located with an adult daycare center. When they age out into public school, elementary school, usually what the providers hear back is that they are the most accepting children, the most patient children, they have the best soft skills. They look at somebody who has a disability as somebody just like them. They don't see the disability first. They're not put off by wheelchairs. And again, they have learned to listen more than oftentimes happens. I loved it. I was visiting a center once in Oklahoma, and it had a pre-K class and a kindergarten class. And it was the first day that the pre-K kids were coming in. And the kindergarten kids were the ones that were warning them. You do not run around the grandparents. You do not, you could risk running into one of them. You go slow when you're with our grand friends. And it wasn't the adults telling them or anything like that. It was like the kids were teaching each other. So I think that that's one of the beauties. So yes, the impact of intergenerational connections. We always need to do more research. We need to understand it more deeply, and not just know that it works. But there is a body of knowledge that supports it and that supports how it connects people across generations and helps increase belonging.
Thank you so much, Donna. I think we might have time for just a couple more questions. So we do have a few more in the Q&A here. One of them is around kind of what are nonprofit organizations doing really well in your mind and the ones that you're working with, and what are some of the things that we're doing that maybe we should reconsider and think differently about how we're approaching in the design of intergenerational volunteer initiatives.
Some of this I've mentioned, which
Yeah.
is that the intentionality is very important. And I've talked with so many people who think that they're doing intergenerational work, but in fact they're doing multi-generational work. Or what they're doing is maybe an intergenerational activity, which can sometimes be more harmful than not. Because again, people need to be prepared. You can't just expect to do a party once a year and that there'll be these great connections that develop, because generally there are planned activities, there are informal activities, but there's that exposure element that is really, really critical to the success. So it's thinking about what that dosage is going to be, realizing that it doesn't have to be long periods of time, but it needs to be, somewhat more frequent than sometimes people think it does. And it's letting some relationships develop organically. But it's that preparation, that debriefing, and being aware of what's happening between the participants. It's also, there's a peer element, older adults recruiting other older adults for a program that they're involved with, young people recruiting other young people. It's letting that leadership develop, and making sure that there's buy-in throughout the organization, because there's usually a champion, and what you want is it to last after that champion is gone, if that champion leaves.
Thank you so much, Don. Oh, sorry, Megan, did you want to follow up on that? No. Okay.
No, no, I'll let you keep going, Heather.
Okay, so we do have one final question, Donna, if you're game, and that is really looking at, sort of in an increasingly digital world, how can technology be leveraged to bridge the gap between generations?
It's very interesting because technology is one of the probably one of the most oftentimes cited intergenerational program. It's younger people teaching older adults how to use computers or technology. It was during the pandemic when so many programs went online, and we realized we could connect people using technology. So technology is a vehicle. But what's interesting to me is that the work that's been done or the survey that's been done of older adults in technology programs, oftentimes they don't cite learning the technology first. What they cite is the relationship with the person who's sitting next to them, teaching them. So it's realizing that that human connection is still vitally important. One small study that was done on intergenerational programs during and after the pandemic found that yes, technology could be used to connect generations, but it couldn't compete with actually connecting people. It's that element that I think is important. And it's also realizing that technology, I always loved a program where a 16-year-old was the mentor to a 92-year-old. And when I was visiting with them one day, it was actually the 92-year-old that was introducing the 16-year-old to a new app that he had just learned about. So it's realizing it works both ways. And then one of my favorite that I'll end with was an older woman who was in a intergenerational technology program, and she was being interviewed about something, and they said, well, what, we understand you're going to learn how to take a selfie today. And she said, and she laughed and she said, yes, we are going to learn how to take selfies. I'm not sure what it is or if I want to know, but it'll be fun. So again, it's that connection, that relationship between people. And then there's the vehicles you use to bring them together.
Thank you so much, Donna. I think you've given us all a lot of food for thought. At that point, I think we've wrapped up with the questions that people have posed in the chat and in the Q&A. So thank you very, very much. And back to you, Megan.
Thank you.
Thanks
And
so much.
Megan.
Yeah, thank you so much, Donna. We are so we feel so lucky and appreciative of your time and your energy and all of the learning that we're doing to understand how Generations United, which is really an international leader in this space, is doing this work, and their research and their knowledge and learnings. We're really fortunate to be able to integrate that into how we're building out the intergenerational engagement hub that we're building here in Canada. So a huge thank you to you and your team, and for your presence today, and your wisdom that you've shared with all of us, and your graciousness in answering all of our questions and time. So thank you, Donna. Now I want to, sorry, Donnie, we're going to say one
I
more
was just
thing.
going to say thank you. And thanks for everything you're doing, Megan, and you and your team, because I do think it's an incredible opportunity for your country. And we're very excited about being a part of it, very proud to be a part of it. And we're here to do anything we can to support you and your success. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Donna. Now I want to introduce Anita Newling, who is our Intergenerational Initiatives Manager. Anita brings tremendous expertise around fostering the power of intergenerational relationships, and she's going to share some of the exciting work that Volunteer Canada is currently doing to better adapt and evolve our intergenerational engagement strategies, and to think about the future for Canada around intergenerational engagement. So I'm going to pass the floor to you, Anita, and we're really excited to hear about the work that we're leading here.
Great. Thank you very much, Megan, for that introduction. And thank you to Donna and Megan for that conversation too. It's really given everyone a lot to reflect on. As mentioned, I've worked in the intergenerational space for some time now, and I've seen the transformative power of this approach firsthand. Once you've seen the connections that are being made, and you see like challenges that we're facing, like ageism, being addressed right in front of you, you just can't stop integrating this approach into your work. So I hope that you've heard today from Donna and what you're going to hear about our work today will inspire you to join us in this movement. We thought it'd be interesting to open this intergenerational kind of update with a poll. I'm really excited to hear from you today how you might have been involved in this space in the past, or if you've been thinking about it. So our poll question is going to go up in a second here now. There we are. Great. Thank you very much for doing that. So have you integrated or thought about integrating intergenerational engagement into your volunteer program? If you would take a moment to answer that for us. And then we'll see who's in the room today, where everybody is, where everybody's coming from today. That's great. They're giving you lots of time to decide. Fantastic. Do we see a, there we go. Okay, great. So lots of people have already been engaged, which is fantastic. And a few of you have not, and some of you are not, but are interested, which is great. So for those of you who answered yes, that's really fantastic. If I haven't connected with you already, I'd love to hear about what you've been involved with and how those programs or events have gone. For those of you who answered no, I'm also really interested to hear from you as well about whether there's been any barriers to you connecting generations in your organization or your community. And lastly, the no's, but I'm interested group, that's always very exciting to hear. We're going to have lots of opportunities for you to connect to resources, pilot projects, and support that can make that happen for you. At the end of my presentation, I'm going to be sharing the ways that you can connect with us and share your thoughts and get involved. But first, I'm going to share with you briefly how we are positioning ourselves in the intergenerational space, why we're here, and what initiatives that we have ahead. So what's brought us to this place and why now? Volunteer Canada's mission is to advance volunteerism to grow connection, community, and belonging. And as the discussion that you just heard highlighted, we're experiencing a growing loneliness epidemic and belonging deficit in our communities. To address this, Volunteer Canada is embracing and building out a field of evidence-based practice related to intergenerational engagement as a catalyst for deeper connections across our communities. We actually started this work in this intergenerational landscape in 2021 after receiving funding from the Waltons Trust. We held interviews and roundtable discussions with intergenerational program staff and volunteers, and we engaged with intergenerational practice leads across the country, as well as internationally. We wanted to know where are the gaps in this space and how we could support and build the capacity of organizations developing intergenerational initiatives. So what came out of this first project was some clear next steps. And these included the need for an online network and directory, which folks in those discussions often referred to as a hub. People were also looking for more public education and policy advocacy, and also a place for shared resources to increase programming quality and shared evidence-informed practice. And finally, they were looking for funding support to strengthen existing programs, but also scale into new communities and build out the sector. In 2023, we received further funding from the Waltons Trust for an additional 3-year project to support the pathways to participation in community for older adults to address social isolation and loneliness. And one of the components of this project is creating a pan-Canadian initiative to support intergenerational work. Now, of course, talking about connecting generations also requires work to support youth and youth-serving agencies. Last year, we undertook a project called Empathy Engaged, which some of you may have heard me talk about before. This research project, funded by the Rideau Hall Foundation, involved roundtable discussions with youth across the country to identify current motivators and barriers to participation. Youth also had the opportunity to share their thoughts on how they thought organizations could successfully engage young volunteers in formal opportunities. The report on this insightful project will be available on our website in the coming weeks, so look out for that. Just kind of circling back to our intergenerational work, what does this look like and how are we positioning ourselves in the space? Well, this further funding has given us the opportunity to address the suggested next steps from that previous work. So we have embarked on a journey to create a national online hub for intergenerational work across the country to support older adult and youth participation in community. Since early summer, as you heard, we've had the privilege of working with the amazing team at Generations United. They're sharing their years of experience, creating national networks and building intergenerational movements. And they're advising us on work to develop the hub, its educational components, and the pilot project work, as well as supporting us as we develop the National Volunteer Action Strategy. This is a very exciting partnership. As you can tell from both sides, we're very excited to be in this partnership. But we are also engaging Canadians already working in the intergenerational space to advise us on content for the hub and help us plan for a sustainable future. The hub will be a place for resources and connection. Those engaged in intergenerational programs will be able to go there for support, and those looking to start will find the tools to do so. All ages will have a clear pathway to participation in volunteering opportunities with another generation. We'll also be creating a community of practice to strengthen the movement and advocate for the work, and the hub will be a networking point for this group. The hub will also be a place to connect with pilot projects and scaling initiatives that we are leading and supporting, as well as other intergenerational programs happening across the country. There'll also be training and regular educational opportunities for organizations and groups interested in connecting generations. So the hub will be launched in the spring of 2025. But today, with thanks to the amazing team at Creative Day for Social Good this year, I'm very excited to share with you the hub name and logo. I think we're going to go across to some slides. Wonderful. Thank you, Alison. Generations Co. Connection, collaboration, community. As we've heard today, connecting generations can have a transformative effect on communities. When we work together, we not only enhance the well-being of those involved, increase their social capital and sense of belonging, but we challenge ageism, increase social cohesion, and support a more resilient society. In partnership with Canadian leaders and international experts, we're building an exciting intergenerational engagement ecosystem that will support individuals, organizations, and businesses to reimagine how they support engagement, participation, and volunteerism across the lifespan. Generations Co. is an evolving and expanding source for resources, networking, engagement, research, and tools that will help build an intergenerational movement. The hub's planned launch next year will coincide with Global Intergenerational Week and National Volunteer Week. In the interim, while you are eagerly awaiting the hub, I'm also excited to share that we're launching an intergenerational page on our website today. This new page will share some insights into this initiative and will connect you to tools, resources, and our recent work. There's so much going on that I can't cover it all today in this presentation, but there will be more resources, and our current work will be updated there regularly, so please do check back often. The page also has a stay connected link at the bottom, and here you can subscribe to our newsletter to keep up to date on our work, or contact us with questions or just to connect. If anyone has questions, or you'd like to get involved in an intergenerational program, or you're interested in a pilot project in your community, then please reach out. Don't hesitate to get in touch. If you have been thinking about connecting generations in your organization, or today has inspired you to want to start an intergenerational initiative, now is the time for connection, collaboration, and community. Connecting generations and collaborating on ideas builds stronger communities for a brighter future. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and I'm really excited to hear from some of you in the future. And I think I'm handing back to Megan now.
Thank you so much, Anita. It's wonderful to hear all the work that is underway and the great hub that will be launched in the spring and the resources on the website. And we're so excited to be able to work in partnership and collaboration on this new pan-Canadian initiative, Generations Co., and to see what benefits will emerge from its launch and its growth. So thank you so much, Anita, for your leadership on this important work. We are rounding the corner to the end of our conversation today, and this is where I always get super excited because it's an opportunity for us to launch the theme for National Volunteer Week for 2025. So much excitement at this moment in the conversation, and I'm really pleased to pass the floor to Alison Olszewski, who is Volunteer Canada's Manager of Marketing and Communications, to share this year's theme and some important details on the work and the launch of National Volunteer Week for 2025. Over to you, Alison.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. As many of you know, National Volunteer Week is our annual public awareness campaign where we celebrate and thank Canada's over 24 million volunteers. It's a chance for us to raise awareness about the value and impact of volunteering, And it's really another opportunity to have important conversations on why volunteering and volunteer engagement is so important. So with that, I would like to introduce you to our theme for 2025. Volunteers make waves, and together we create ripples of change. So we are really excited about this theme as it highlights the power, impact, and importance of individual and collective volunteer efforts across the country. Because like a wave, volunteering is movement building. So some might think of making waves as a bit disruptive, but sometimes we need a bit of disruption to create positive social change. So water is in constant motion, always flowing, shifting, and transforming with every powerful wave or quiet ripple. We acknowledge that each contribution, big or small, creates momentum and has the power to influence and inspire, joining a wave of positive change. We heard from Donna earlier about the different ways that people engage in their community based on their different interests. And I think it's really important to acknowledge the different ways that people give their time and how they participate. So we really want to highlight that the different ways that people are becoming engaged. Each drop of water, each wave, each ripple, each person's unique perspective and experience brings new energy, empowering waves of innovative solutions and emerging responses. So as individual actions come together, the wave of volunteering swells. Riding that momentum, we move forward with hope and optimism. These waves of volunteering expand our capacity, building strong, interconnected, and interdependent communities. So during National Volunteer Week 2025, we come together to recognize and celebrate all of the different ways that volunteers are making waves. As we have done in past years, Volunteer Canada will be providing a toolkit for your use and products for purchase through our e-store. Part of our role here at Volunteer Canada for that week is to provide you with accessible and customizable ways to thank your volunteers in a really personal way. We will once again have customizable templates for social media so that you can include your images and tell the stories of your volunteers. National Volunteer Week is not only a great time to thank our volunteers, but to highlight and share the impact, to share the different ways that volunteers can participate. We look forward to seeing how you use these materials and reading your stories. We try to interact with and reshare as much as we can that week to really amplify the impact. So make sure you're interacting with us as well, tagging us using the hashtags so we can see what you're up to. This is just an example of some of the materials that'll be available that will be customizable. So put your images in there, add your logo, add your volunteers and their names, and really share out what's been going on. So whether you are creating waves or riding a new or established wave, all of our actions are ripples of a larger collective movement towards creating the world that we want to live. So with that, here is our National Volunteer Week theme 2025. More information will be coming in the new year. So stay tuned and subscribe to our newsletter so you're staying informed. Follow us on social media. And we really look forward to celebrating with you in April, early May. So with that, I will pass it back to Megan.
Thank you so much, Allison. And I have visions of surfing in 2025. So, and think about all of the great things that are going to come as we celebrate and thank volunteers during National Volunteer Week. And note that the change in time or the timing is a little bit different this year. So it's bridging April to May, and we're excited to see the ways and celebrate all of the ways that volunteers are making waves in your communities. We're wrapping up today's conversation, and I'm so thankful for everyone who was able to join us today and to participate in this conversation. I am also reflecting on all of the ways that volunteers throughout the lifespan have impacted my life. both young and old, and I'm very appreciative today on International Day of the Volunteer for the work and the contributions of volunteers as they exist everywhere and in all ways across our communities. So thank you all for joining us. There's a bunch of resources in the chat. If you scroll through the chat, you'll find those resources available, and they may help you either in National Volunteer Week or as you think about your own intergenerational practice. As we look ahead to 2025, there's lots of exciting work on the horizon, both in terms of the launch of Generations Co. and as well as the work we're leading on the National Volunteer Action Strategy. So thank you to everyone for participating today. Happy International Day of the Volunteer, and enjoy the rest of the day wherever you are across this country. Bye for now, and have a great day. Thank you.